Sure. That time that Evil Knievel, he jumped off a cliff in his motorcycle and he almost made it. It was a good attempt. He still crashed and broke 15 bones in his body, but it was a good attempt, right? A lot of you know about the travails, the trials, the sad descent into mediocrity that has become Lord of the Rings games. What we have now is we have a new article that interviews Lee Guinchard, one of the leads at the Embracer Group, talking all about what's going on with Lord of the Rings, particularly when it comes to their licenses for games. But before I jump into that, welcome to the One Rings Exploring Tolkien channel. We are shining a light on Tolkien in today's cultural landscape, reminding everyone that Tolkien's original works are always the best. So dive deep with us every Tuesday on our podcast, which you can find just by searching for Exploring Tolkien. It's released every Tuesday morning. Give it a shot and give us a thumbs up. Give us a like. We'd appreciate that too. So last year, we had the amazing release of this game, Lord of the Rings Gollum, the worst game in years, bar none, that pretty much was roundly decried as one of the worst games in a very long time. It shut down the entire studio that was making this. I live streamed it for 2 episodes and just couldn't do it anymore. It was such a disaster of a game that it just wasn't worth it. And then we also got this game, a crafting game, Lord of the Rings Return to Moria. I didn't play this, not a crafting games fan, but it was met with acceptance. People were fine with it, but there was no rah-rah. There was no excitement over it. It was fine. It came and went, and how many people are playing it now, who knows, because nobody really cares. And then we get the announcement this last week of Tales of the Shire, a cozy game, a Lord of the Rings game where we learned that if you saw our video that came out earlier this week, you can forage for friendships. You don't forge friendships. No, you somehow misspellingly forage them. So we have these 3 games that were the most recent 3 games, essentially, that have come out, not to mention the EA mobile game. I can't remember the title of it, but it was actually canceled. So that's being shut down. I think in the next couple months, if it's not already shut down. So Lord of the Rings games have not exactly had their high point for a long time. I mean, I remember some of the Lord of the Rings games from Return of the King, from the 2 Towers that came out. I think it was probably PlayStation 2 and GameCube then. Those were fun. Those were fine. Those were enjoyable. They held to the movies, and for the time, they were actually a good rendition of what it would be like to play in that world. So those were good, but it's been kind of a downhill spiral from that early 2000s period. I know we had Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth. So we have this article here where Lee Guinchard reveals to us some of what's going on with the Embracer Group. He is the CEO of Embracer Free Mode. Don't confuse that with the whole Embracer Group. It's a part of the public company called Middle-earth Enterprises and Friends now. That's what it's going to be spun off as, Middle-earth Enterprises and Friends. So he's not in control of books like the Silmarillion, which the Tolkien estate still has, but he's in control of everything that Middle-earth Enterprises has had since the 70s forward, which is Lord of the Rings-based games, movies, and other paraphernalia that Tolkien sold back, I think, in the late 60s. So with this new IP, they're looking to do a lot. And I think this says a lot right here. Their goal is to reach billions of people, not just millions of people. Okay, billions. I mean, we're talking at least 1/8 of the world's population with that. So all right, set your goal high. I appreciate that. And so that's why they make the point that we've got the Lord of the Rings films coming out. The new one that Peter Jackson is coming up with Philippa Boyens and Fran Walsh, the screenwriters of Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, 2 Towers. And they are calling it, of course, The Hunt for Gollum. We had a video come out about that last week as well. And he says, this IP needs to be taken care of. We need to actually use it. And so the games that we're seeing right now, he makes the point, they were greenlit before Embracer acquired them. So they didn't greenlight these games that we see coming out. And that includes the Gollum game, which they shut down right away, or was shut down right away by this Daedalic company. And then we have Tales of the Shire. Here's what they wrote. Tales of the Shire in particular is going after the new audience that likes cozy, feel-good games, but these are all smaller goals in advance of the more ambitious plans that he has now. So what are those ambitious plans? Well, 1, we saw that they're going to go after 1 billion people. Okay. 2 ambitious plans are we're going to have a new movie coming out with Peter Jackson, right, in 2026, sometime there. Rings of Power, I don't think they're really banking on that, and I'll get into that later. So you'll see where the Rings of Power is not something that they're thinking is in their wheelhouse necessarily. And three, the third part of this is going to be where these new games are going to be focusing on. And here's what he said. He told me, Guinchard told this interviewer, that the games are going to be made to fully explore the new universe being created, and games will be considered as hugely important in the Middle-earth entertainment of the future. Okay, what does that mean? One, it's a new universe. I get what it sounds like after reading this. They're going for a Marvel Cinematic Universe, a DC universe, a Star Wars universe. It's interconnected. You can't do one without the other, right? They hold the licenses to this stuff, where you could make games and movies and tabletop games and behind the scenes books, all that sort of stuff. They can do that, but they're going to try and make it interconnected. That's a big, big ask. You can give it a feel, right? Peter Jackson has essentially created the design language for Middle Earth that we're all familiar with. And if they use that, I could say, okay, then you're kind of creating that cinematic universe using that design language. But if they're going for that, then why would they greenlight something like what we have here, which is Tales of the Shire? This here has nothing like that design language that Peter Jackson had. Sure, it's got the round hobbit holes, and it's got it's got things that look like it, but it's not in what we would say is like, okay, do you want this in the Middle Earth universe? Is that what you're looking to create? And how long are they going to do this? Obviously, they're not going to like cancel a game that was pretty much done and would take a lot of energy to simply throw under the bus. Why not let it go and see how it's going to work? It seems like they're so confident to reach that billion people with this Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth, Tolkien IP that they own, that they're now going to be splitting it into three companies. They're going to have Asmodee Group with its tabletop games, Coffee Stain and Friends. I'm not sure what that's about. And Middle Earth Enterprises and Friends. The and Friends thing is, I think that's just, it's got to be, right? It says temporary name is got to be like, they don't know what to call it yet. So they're just throwing and Friends there because it includes more than just what Middle Earth Enterprises was. But they're clearly reaching for something bigger than what Middle Earth Enterprises was before. This grand plan of the future requires something that Lord of the Rings, outside of what Peter Jackson has done with it since 2003 and The Return of the King, has been lacking, which is great creators. Here's what they wrote. Getting great creators to build is what it takes to restart these games. Some of that could take years to come to fruition, particularly if you think about the need to link everything in a single narrative. Gosh, I hope they don't do that. Time is one of the details that's super important in Middle Earth. And if you start making everything part of the big narrative and it's got to all fit together, you are just completely hemming yourself into a story that is probably going to get pretty boring. All right. So particularly if you think about the need to link everything in a single narrative, which is the strong suit of Lord of the Rings franchise, maybe to somebody who hasn't read the rest of it or the appendices, but I don't know if that's what why the strong suit doesn't even really make sense. The strong suit of the Lord of the Rings franchise is the cohesiveness, the ability to tell us a great story, the characters, the world. Tolkien's dedication to it is what makes it a strong IP. They write, it's less like Call of Duty, which has some continuous narrative, but often isn't tightly linked. And a bit more similar to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where there were story linkages across the many movies. I think that's a mistake. You don't go for one big storyline across all your different tales or all your different games. That would be a mistake. You're hemming yourself in. Go wider. Take some of the other stories that haven't been told and make something good out of them, but hold close to what Tolkien actually wrote. Here's what Guinchard said. For this property and how we set it up for the future, we've got to acknowledge and support creators first. Good. You need a passionate creator behind your property, not a passionate committee, not a board telling you what to do. You need a Peter Jackson. You need a George Lucas. You need someone who's going to sit there and say, I have this vision for this here, and I'm going to shepherd it into where it needs to be. And some of those might not work, but for the most part, those kinds of personalities, the passionate ones, are the ones that are going to make something great and get it done. All I can say through all this is that you have to respect the works. Good. Let's respect the works. I think that's the right thing to do. We believe that gaming can be the future, of course, and I think we want to do something amazing and big over time, and really it's important to build those relationships in order to really take this thing into the next chapter. Historically, it's just been so fragmented. Indeed, with these latest three games, we can see how fragmented it is. Nobody wants The Hunt for Gollum. Nobody really cares about Return to Moria. And Tales of the Shire is a game that it's just, Stardew Valley in Middle-earth that looks slightly 3D. Within the Embracer Group, there was no team that could build MMOs, so it made perfect sense for Amazon, which has published MMOs like New World. Should I have heard of that MMO, New World? I mean, I'm not a full-time gamer, but I play games. I've never heard of New World. All right. To make the next Lord of the Rings MMO, massively multiplayer online game. Guinchard knew the Amazon games chief, Christoph Hartmann, back in their 2K days at Take-Two. Okay. Well, the guy, Guinchard, he has a pedigree that comes from the game industry. So he knows people, and, he'll tie into people that he knows and can trust, and perhaps it'll work out. Amazon does not hold a long leash in my yard. I'm keeping it close because it bites people pretty hard with its bad quality works like the Rings of Power. So Guinchard then continues to talk about this fidelity to Tolkien that he mentioned. It's really the power of doing the right thing by the property. We've had a lot more input into that because we have an internal games team now. They have been a lot more involved in that in the last 6 to 8 months. And again, it really hits a spot for us and also brings in potential new audiences. There are a lot of these cozy games now, but this one is really quite cozy. Okay. I mean, quite cozy. Oh man, the game has a lot of attention to detail and has more diverse leadership with women leads. It's a small game with a lower price point. It's like a game in the arts and crafts category. Okay, great. Okay, look, just don't put women in a box and say it's better because it's women. It's better because you have good people doing it, woman or man. I don't care. It's not better because somebody's got a different body type. Okay. I mean, I guess maybe cozy games, you probably want to have more women because maybe that's the game style for it. But diversity doesn't matter. Making the better game matters. And if that means making the better game means because more women play it, you should probably get more women in the lead. Say that instead of, sorry, my soapbox there. So then this interviewer asked him if there's a place in fan fiction or for fan fiction in games like Roblox, which I would hopefully, dear Lord, no, please don't let Roblox get anything anywhere near Middle Earth. But he agreed that there is an opportunity. It's a lot bigger than people might realize, he said. Embracing your communities and building with them. The world is naturally going there, building things with them. Oh man, not a good idea. I do not want to see that there. All right. So now here's where I teased a little bit earlier about the Rings of Power and how I don't think they're doubling down on this. And these statements that he makes are indicative of that. He's kind of circumspect. He's dancing around the edges of this conversation without saying much about it. So here's what he said. Guinchard believes there could be many more years of the Rings of Power. It has valid criticisms, particularly where it diverges from canon in the attempt to include hobbits in the Second Age, but it was a good attempt to be creative and add more lore to the canon. Sure. That time that Evel Knievel, he jumped off a cliff in his motorcycle and he almost made it. It was a good attempt. He still crashed and broke 15 bones in his body, but it was a good attempt, right? Guinchard said, it wasn't what I originally thought it would be, The Rings of Power. But I'm very much looking forward to seeing how the story develops in season 2, because there wasn't much development of the story in the first season. It was okay. On the other hand, Guinchard is excited about the upcoming War of the Rohirrim, set 183 years before the War of the Ring and the Lord of the Rings. It's an animated film with an amazing story that is totally in canon and authentic. And the film tells the fate of the House of Helm Hammerhand, the legendary King of Rohan. Quick aside, get our podcast Exploring Tolkien. We're actually going to be spending in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we're going to be spending time going over the House of Errol and the appendices in The Return of the King and talking in depth about the War of the Rohirrim and what the story is going to be about, and in depth about Rohan and the history of Rohan. So yeah, just look up Exploring Tolkien anywhere online and you'll find us. But the Rings of Power is going to be different than the MMO, right? It's in the game ecosystem. So this idea that he said, oh, we want to have a world that ties it together like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like DC, like Star Wars, but Rings of Power is not going to be part of it. It won't be part of the game ecosystem. So, right, they're separating themselves from it because they know Rings of Power is not going to be bringing back any of the hardcore fans into its fold anytime soon. He said they are a licensee, but we're working very closely with them on the world and how it looks and feels. There's no reason why these things can't sort of be interconnected there. So, okay, so let's get going. So, they'll do a little bit, but I don't think they're going to be sinking their teeth hard into Rings of Power and making their mark there. They want to keep it separate from the games. Then they go into the first stage and what could be done there. Now, they don't have the licenses, right? That's all still held within Lord of the Rings, or within Tolkien Enterprises, right? That's still held there. So they hold the Silmarillion rights other than what's in the appendices, except except for Baron and Luthien. Tolkien had an exception for Baron and Luthien and said, you cannot use Baron and Luthien in these licenses that I'm selling to you. That is off the table. So that's why we haven't seen any Baron and Luthien in anything anywhere, because you're not allowed to use it per explicit Tolkien commands. But this is what Guinchard said. This is some of the brushstrokes of areas, the first stage, where we might want to explore gaming, which is in the first stage, the foundations for the whole world are set, the rights are locked up. Right. He means with the Tolkien estate, the rights are locked up. But when I'm looking at the future, it's interesting. There are some great stories with Baron and Luthien. Please don't start with Baron and Luthien. Don't. There are some really interesting things to go after with the Silmarillion. You've got to have a plan. Yes, there are some really interesting things to go after with the Silmarillion. But don't just throw out Baron and Luthien as the first one. I think there are better tales. Go after the sack of Menegroth by the dwarves with the Silmaril there, and then maybe you can have Baron at the end come and save the Silmaril after the dwarves have destroyed Menegroth. Right? There's some stories there. Maybe do that, but don't do Baron and Luthien. You could have some tertiary things. Okay. These are epic stories that are, in my opinion, could be every bit as compelling as The Lord of the Rings, but they're unfinished and not nearly as fleshed out as the narrative of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Sure, that's true. The details are in the Silmarillion, but they're not well known beyond those inside the fandom. You've got to connect them, and I think that's better, right? And this kind of speaks separately from what they were saying about creating a one timeline, right? If you're going to go back to the first age, if you're thinking about that, why would you want to create a timeline, right? You could create a look and feel, right? That design language I was talking about that Peter Jackson has when he created Middle-earth, but you can't really have a timeline here. So going back to those stories, I find would be interesting. There's a little bit more leeway to tell those stories because they aren't fleshed out as they are in the Lord of the Rings books. But yeah, but what they don't want to do is they don't want to just throw out rights all the time and sell them and just, be like a lawyer that's just an ambulance chasing, right? Oh, you can make some money on this game. Sure. Here's a license. We'll make some money on that. Right. Cause that's going to water it down. And in regards to that, here's what he said. If you treat everything like just a bunch of rights all the time and a bunch of transactions, you get average. Indeed, that's where we've been for many years. This part of the group is going to be focused on building long-term intellectual property with its creators and with other creators as well. Good. We use the words Middle-earth and Friends because it really is about the IP. It's all about the IP. That's the one thing we've got. A lot of opportunities for building out in a very Middle-earth way. I'm not sure what that means, building out in a very Middle-earth way. Sounds like press release speak. Like, I don't know. What is a building out in a very Middle-earth way? If you got an idea, comment below. I'm trying to imagine what building a video game out in a building the IP out in a very Middle-earth way, what that would look like. Okay, anyway, what does the next chapter mean? This is like the torchlight in the middle of the journey. Okay, so good. Be more choosy with your IPs. Don't give it to everybody. Particularly find somebody with passion. Find that person who pitches you something and it says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this story. It's going to be done this way, and this is going to be the end result. And it's not done because Jeff Bezos had a midlife crisis and wanted his own Game of Thrones show. Be choosy with your licenses, right? They're going to retain oversight on the projects and the IP, and they'll take a strategic approach to partners, both inside Embracer and among external teams. It'll do this with games, and it has an exclusive partnership on movies with Warner Brothers, New Line Cinema. And it'll work with a wide variety of merchandise companies and lean heavily on Warner. Okay, yes, don't do what Disney did with Star Wars and is now pulling back, or what Disney did with Marvel, is inundate the industry with junk that nobody cares about. Because once you have mediocrity come out and take a foothold, it takes a lot to lift that foot up again, right? It's like it's stuck in cement. Everyone just expects mediocrity from Star Wars and Marvel now. Nobody is expecting anything great. Whereas I think, I'm going through these Marvel movies with my kids, the original ones, and you get up to the Avengers movie, and it's an event, and now everything's just with these things. Don't do that with Lord of the Rings. Be choosy. Keep it small in the amount, right? You can swing big, but don't swing a lot. But like we said, it's big. They have to swing big because it's a billion people they're looking to get. The ambition is big, like the modern way that the Marvel Cinematic Universe or Star Wars has been handled by Disney. Guinchard is thinking about developing the central hub and how it means slightly different things in the Lord of the Rings universe. In that way, he will make a direct comparison to the other franchises. Good. We don't want to be compared to those right now because they are bad. Okay, now this is the writer speaking. I'm not going to put these words into Guinchard, but I think this is worthwhile because this is a mistake. He says, while the written word is clear, Tolkien's written word, the visual interpretation is up for grabs. Sure, that's part of what subcreation is. Read on Fairy Stories by Tolkien. He talks about how there's nothing more intimate in art than creating your own world inside your head based on reading. That's why he finds it the highest form of art. There are so many different kinds of art styles, Guinchard said, with the look of things like Fortnite, Borderlands, GTA, Tomb Raider, and more. The teams will have to figure out what Frodo looks like and more, sure. And if an Asian audience is looking at a version of the Lord of the Rings property in the future, how would it be visualized for them? Okay. It doesn't matter, right? Like, it sounds to me like what they're saying is that in order to make it worthwhile for an Asian audience, you have to make it look Asian. You have to have an Asian Frodo. No, I look, but of course there's the huge, the very, very large pushback against Ubisoft now for the latest game, Assassin's Creed Shadows, which is going to have an African-American black protagonist instead of an Asian protagonist as a samurai in Japan. Look, if you're in Japan, do something Japanese. Get a freaking Japanese samurai. I would love that. That would be great. It would be fun. Like, I don't care. I don't need to identify with somebody, right? Identify with their morals, with their with their meaning more than I do with their skin color. That is the most surface level thing. It doesn't matter. I want to like the people rather than look like the people. I want to like the people, not look like the people. People like Frodo no matter what he looks like. And since Tolkien wrote it as a Northern European legend for the mythology of England, and he uses the word fair a whole awful lot, right? Fair-skinned for these people. There's a reason that it needs to be done that way because Tolkien intended it that way. Again, as I said about exploring Tolkien, what our goal is to say, right? We're examining these things and holding true to what Tolkien originally wrote. And Tolkien originally wrote it as a mythology for Middle Earth. And don't be so stupid that to say that the way somebody looks is the way we identify with them. I identify with somebody if they hold the same meanings and morals in life that I do, more so than any skin color. So don't go down this road. So they're swinging for the fences. They're shooting to get 1 billion people. They're shooting to get a ton of people into Middle Earth. But they won't do that if they cater to small mindsets. If they cater to say, we're going to just hire for diversity, or we're going to do this game because this is what's popular now, or we have to make characters and places look like places where they're from in order to make them like it. No, we like things because it's done well. It's done excellently. That's why Lord of the Rings has sold hundreds of millions of copies, not because it makes people feel happy because they look like them, but because it's an amazing story told with purpose, with intent, with passion. You have to do the same thing with video games. I hope these guys, look, I always hope they succeed. Track record isn't good for what came before them. They're now in charge. We can start judging them after Tales of the Shire. That's the current game. That the last game, I think that's on the docket that they were not involved in. So the next games come out. We'll keep judging based on what we see. That's all we can do. I just still think it's funny that they're stepping back from the Rings of Power. They're not gonna they just don't want to get that close to it because it's kind of it's a train wreck. Nobody really likes it. Everyone's just the people that like it are okay with it, and that's about as good as you can get. So check us out, exploringtolkien.com. We will be diving into War of the Rohirrim real soon and diving into Rohan. So check out the podcast, Exploring Tolkien.